So I've been wondering lately, who or what is going to be the main threat of the DCU? I think they have plenty of options that they could choose from for the DCU's main threat. I think there are plenty of powerful DC villains out there, a lot that could give the Justice League and other groups in DC a challenge. There are so many characters that band all the superhero teams on Earth together and they'll still have a hard time fighting this particular entity. There are going to be villains that I've possibly forgotten about or just simply did not think about during this video. But there's a couple of big names that I think we need to look at and consider. Would James Gunn consider making this the main threat of the DCU? I've been thinking a lot about this Green Lantern show because, well, one, I'm excited for it. I think it's great we're finally getting something Green Lantern related. It's been damn near long enough. But also, too, the fact that it has literally been told to us they are going to stumble across something terrifying, and this something probably being the main threat of the DCU, which, by the way, I think is a fantastic way of bringing in the threat of the wider DCU for the future. Who could it be? What could it be? What will the DCU have the way Marvel had Thanos for the first 10 years? The way they are now getting Kang the Conqueror for potentially the next 10 years? What is going to be the DCU's 10-year villain? First of all, I've mentioned before Mongul and Warworld. I have a theory, and albeit possibly very crazy theory about it. It is from my Superman and Authority video where I speculated what James Gunn could be doing with those characters. If you want to check out my theory, check out that video, but I'll put it plainly here, maybe Mongul and Warworld could be the threat of the DCU, considering recently in comic books, Superman and the Authority have had run-ins with Mongul and the Warworld, and back in the 80s, Superman and Supergirl have had conflicts with Mongul and Warworld. And what are they making for the DCU? A Superman movie, a Supergirl movie, and an Authority movie. It could potentially tie in, but I won't spend too much time on Mongul since I've already done that before. Who else do we have? Well, there's a potential of Braniac. I think Braniac is on a completely different level of intelligence, an astral plane of intelligence, something far beyond smarter than that. He is one of the most deadliest villains in DC and to Superman. Braniac has been seen over times not just being a villain to Superman, but being a villain to the DC universe. Just giving you two examples right now, he's the overall villain in the Injustice 2 game, and he seems like he's going to be the overall villain in the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League game. Braniac has so many methods to incapacitate people, but not just people. Cities and worlds and systems and galaxies. He is by far one of the hardest villains that the Justice League could potentially fight. Although, with that being said, I feel like if they ever use Braniac, which I personally believe they should use Braniac, and it's a shame that Henry Cavill's Man of Steel 2 isn't happening because it seems like he was going to be the villain. But if they ever do use Braniac, I do have a feeling they'll want to use Braniac as strictly a Superman villain. Maybe even a joint Superman-Supergirl movie where they have to fight Braniac. But regardless, I don't think they would want to use Braniac as a main villain for the DCU. Would you see me complaining if they did? Absolutely not. I think it would be a great starting villain. I just have my doubts that they would ever do it, and I think they would want to solidify Braniac to just Superman, at least to begin. Then you have the Legion of Doom, which is basically just Evil Justice League. I love Lex Luthor, and once again, I think his intelligence is beyond a vast majority in the DC universe. That group is filled with some great enemies to the Justice League. There's so many different variations, but you could potentially have Joker, Deathstroke, Cheetah, Gorilla Grodd. The possibilities are endless. The only problem is I don't think the Legion of Doom could be the overall arcing DCU threat, and even if you want to just solidify it to one person, I don't think Lex Luthor would be enough, because there are even times where Lex Luthor does the right thing. In a DCU where the heroes of Earth have to band together to stop one big, massive threat, I could see Lex Luthor being in a situation where even though he hates Superman, even though he doesn't love superheroes, he would put his differences aside and fight that main threat. I don't think the Legion of Doom could work as an overall arcing villain of the DCU. Maybe for a part of the DCU for the first couple of years, or maybe a couple of movies. And also too, if the plan is to have the Green Lanterns find the threat in space, which is going to terrify them, it's not going to be the Legion of Doom. But once again, it's a possibility. I'm just throwing it out there. Now, of course, you have Darkseid, which was being planned by Zack Snyder. We got to see quite a bit of him in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we obviously know the plan moving forward was that Darkseid was going to take over Earth, brainwash Superman, and Batman and the Flash and the rest of the survivors had to find a way to stop that from happening, which would have resulted in an apparently a Lord of the Rings type battle on Earth of all Earth's defenses, Justice League, Army, Atlantis, Themyscira, you name it, against Darkseid. Now, apparently, James Gunn and Zack Snyder have had conversations with one another, and apparently Zack Snyder is very supportive of what James Gunn is doing with the DCU. Now, would James Gunn continue this Darkseid threat? Would he maybe take aspects of what Snyder was doing, change it for his DCU, and stretch it over 10 years and make Darkseid the threat? Well, I can tell you right now, if it were up to me, if I was making my own DCU, 150 million% Darkseid would be the main villain of the DC universe for the first 10 or so years. I think there are so many things that add up to Darkseid being the main threat. I think a lot of it makes sense, and even though originally Darkseid was more so of a Superman villain, Darkseid has made himself to be much more than that. He's so much more powerful. His plans are bigger than just one man. It is universal, and I think Darkseid is such a great DCU villain because of that. Now, even though it is a possibility, I don't think James Gunn is going to go that route. I do think he wants to put a little bit of distance, and he wants to separate himself from what came before. And because of that, I think Darkseid is going to take a backseat. Now, granted, we still don't know if this DCU is going to work. This DCU could fail, and it could fail horribly. But if it does work, if we make it 10 years into this, maybe the next 10 years it will feature Darkseid as the main villain. Who knows? We'll have to see. Now, taking it a little more multiversal, I have two options here. And the reason why I feel like maybe there could potentially be a multiversal threat as the 10-year villain for the DCU is because look at what's going on in DC right now. Clearly, the management before really wanted to dive into the multiverse. The Flash movie is going to dive into the multiverse. I would not be surprised if the plan in the DCU is to eventually get into the multiverse. I would not be surprised, like I've said in previous videos, if they want to explore these younger versions of DC characters and then later down the line have some crisis event movie or some sort of Kingdom Come movie where the younger DCU superheroes have to team up with other versions of themselves, like a Henry Cavill Superman, or Bale or Affleck Batman. The list goes on here. Regardless of what happens, maybe I'm wrong about that, just in general, I wouldn't be surprised if something multiversal happens in the future. And if that is the case, here are my two options. Option number one, you could do the Crime Syndicate. We could basically get an exact replica of the Justice League, just a little bit different in design and name, and basically them being evil, not good. And they find a way to come over to James Gunn's DC universe and wreak complete havoc. If the multiverse is a thing, if that is a plan, if that is something they want to explore, what better than to explore the Justice League, but the evil version of them, and to get other potentially popular actors to play Owlman and Ultraman, people who could play Batman and Superman in a different universe, but they gotta play the evil versions of them. Once again, though, I think the Crime Syndicate suffers from the same thing that the Legion of Doom does, and that's viability of being a long-term villain for 10 years. The Crime Syndicate could be the villain for a couple of years or a couple of movies, but for, let's just say 10, 11, 12 years, I don't think that would work. The second multiverse option that I have is, of course, probably the one that anyone would say. It's the Anti-Monitor. And once again, if they are heading down a crisis event, it would make sense to have the Anti-Monitor, considering he is the main threat of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Because of the Anti-Monitor's chaos, we could get that excuse to get all different versions of these characters on screen together to fight the Anti-Monitor. And then at the end of the day, you are literally finally left with one solidified Earth and all its inhabitants. The Anti-Monitor is on another level of power, strength, and simply just being. He is an entity. He is a creature, a phenomenon that takes more than just, take this in, one universe to defeat him. It takes a multiverse to defeat him. So he could be a massive villain that James Gunn's DCU would have to take on. Okay, and then we have the Lanterns. And I'm literally talking about any potential Lantern threat. A lot of the big time events that happen in the DC universe often happens because of Lantern Corps. If it's not Lantern Corps wars that the Justice League, the rest of the teams on Earth, all the Lanterns are fighting up against, it's usually something multiversal. That's how DC likes to dabble with massive events and massive villains. With the Lanterns, there are so many options they could use for a DCU threat for 10 years. One option is the Oans, and maybe it's Rogue Guardians, maybe it's Guardians Gone Traitor. They're creating Manhunters, and Manhunters are assaulting habitable planets all across the galaxy and all galaxies around their universe. Maybe they cause a massive galaxy-wide threat that the Justice League and other heroes have to stop. But I think you gotta go bigger than that. You could go Lantern Corps on their own. You could be dealing with Red Lanterns, or Larfleeze, the Orange Lantern, or the Sinestro Corps. Maybe all the bad emotional lanterns, the red, the orange, the yellow, they all team up with one another and assault Earth, or assault the Green Lanterns, in which the Justice League has to band with them and fight them off. Atrocitus, Sinestro, and Larfleeze all working together, that's not an easy fight. That is not something that you could walk in and be like, yeah, we're gonna win this easily. Just give us a couple minutes. Once again, the Justice League and the other superhero teams on Earth are winning that battle. I do believe you still have to go bigger. So what else do the Lanterns have that could be the threat to the DCU? How about the Black Lanterns? How about the Black Hand? That was a humongous event in the DC universe. Those DC character histories that I do from time to time on my channel, how many times do these characters' histories all intertwine in the Black Lantern War? Everybody finds themselves in that situation because that was literally not just an Earth event, that was a DC universe-wide event. The Black Hand and the Black Lanterns could be something that John Stewart and Hal Jordan find in space that would absolutely terrify them. Because think about the repercussions. You die and you come back reanimated as a Black Lantern and you are damn powerful. That would require the Justice League, all the other teams on Earth, all the Lantern Corps, and any other character or team-up group around the DC universe to defeat the Black Hand and the Black Rings. Or we could go another huge route, another conflict that caused the entire DC universe to get involved, and that is Parallax. Parallax would then imbue itself into Hal Jordan, and Hal Jordan would go on a universal killing spree, killing basically half of the DC universe. That would be a formidable opponent to Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, the Justice League, everybody. And maybe that's their excuse of using two Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan and John Stewart. We can get to know both of these Lanterns. We can learn to love these characters. We can see them develop as friends and humans and Lanterns, and then just as we absolutely hit the pinnacle of loving the characters, you turn Hal Jordan bad into Parallax, where he starts going on a complete tear of the DC universe, killing everybody in his sight. Now, those are just some options. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm probably missing a lot of big-time villains that could be used as a DCU threat. When I really think about these ideas, when I think about these characters and these villains and where the DCU could potentially go, my top picks right now is actually the Black Lanterns or Parallax, considering it's the Lanterns finding this threat and that it leaves them terrified. I think it only makes sense that the first DCU threat for, let's say, the first 10 years is something Lantern related. Of course, there are a lot of threats in the DC universe that reside in space that have no connection or correlation to the Lanterns, but I do think they want to have connectivity to the Lanterns since they've been sidelined for far too long. And what better than a potential war against dead reanimated Lanterns or against Parallax, one of the strongest beings in the DC universe, who murdered half of the universe. But those are just some options I gave you. Those are some ideas I had. If there's any villains you're thinking of, leave them down in the comments below. I would love to hear some of your thoughts on some of the characters I may have missed or forgotten, because at the end of the day, the possibilities right now are endless. But that's it for me on this one, guys. So until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.